Hello and a warm welcome to the Public India. I'm Neelu Vyas, and today we'll talk about the Electoral Bonds verdict, which was given by the Supreme Court on 15th of February. Now, what did Supreme Court do? Supreme Court struck down the Electoral Bond scheme, saying that it is unconstitutional. It is a violation of the Right to Information Act. It also struck down the amendments which were made to the Income Tax Act, the Companies Act, Representation of Peoples Act, and all these legislations to which the amendments were made, they enabled political donations, for the parties. So, how does this verdict really change the landscape? Is there a scope for a review petition? Because many people have started saying that this verdict is a misjudgment of the democracy. Joining me now is veteran Supreme Court lawyer and someone who was also fighting for this case. We have with us Sanjay Hegde. So thank you so much for joining on the Public India. Uh, how is this verdict really going to change the scenario of political financing in the coming days? Or will the government still find an escape route? They will still find some secret methods of political financing.
See, political financing and secret methods, including cash and other transactions, were always there.
Yes.
The government's argument was that we tried to get rid of black money by bringing in electoral bonds, under which companies could buy them and people could donate them, and only political parties could encash them. Now, what has happened is that the Supreme Court has said that these bonds are unconstitutional. So therefore, the next elections, these bonds will not be available. The Lok Sabha elections, bonds will not be available.
Yes.
On your larger question as to whether governments and companies will find some other way of financing, of course, because that is not new. And in fact, 2000 years ago, a Roman gentleman called Curio said a fish will drink water, while referring to corruption in elections of those days.
Right.
So that is normal. This particular special scheme that came about, which ensured that big money could anonymously donate to political parties, that the Supreme Court has struck down.
No, but the verdict is giving an impression that the entire process of political financing, the way especially it was happening with BJP, was wrong, and it will ensure a Swatch Pesa, Swatch politics. So that this verdict is definitely not going to do that.
No. This verdict does not go by X party, Y party making money, or X corporate or Y corporate. It looked at the whole conceptual scheme. What was the scheme? What was Mr. Jaitley's justification for bringing this about? The justification was that, look, there are corporates which can want to donate to political parties through normal banking channels. Once you say normal banking channels, that meant that there were no cash or other transfers. And they would do so as long as they could do it anonymously, because if anonymity was not granted, what would happen is that supposing another party came into power, they would possibly punish such donors. There could be reprisals and all that. And therefore, anonymity was granted. Now, however, this anonymity is a restricted anonymity. The public at large could not know. But the state bank certainly knew who it sold the bonds to. The bonds had some secret numbers on them. So when a party encashed the bond, the state bank is in a position to know that the bond that we sold to X company ended up in the coffers of Y party. So therefore, even the anonymity that was granted was limited anonymity as far as the public was concerned, but transparency as far as those in control of State Bank of India were concerned. So that meant State Bank of India top management plus, of course, the central government.
Right. But Mr. Hegde, since the time the verdict has come, now, of course, a lot of directions have been given by the court that the SBI has to stop the issuance. They have to furnish the details since April 12th, 2019, of all the bonds, how they have been donated, who has donated. Then ECI has to publish the entire list on the website by 13th of March. But there are fears that, the government could still ahead and issue an ordinance and undermine the Supreme Court judgment, because it has been done earlier in case of the election commissioners, the appointments of the election commissioners law, which was brought in. So can that be also a window, for the government to to have its own way?
Well, the ordinance route, in my considered legal opinion, is not possible. You
Okay.
spoke of the election commissioner law, but there the Supreme Court said that we are passing directions till such time as the government brings in a law.
Right.
So therefore, the government brought in a law. Now, the reason I say that an ordinance route is not possible legally is that there is an earlier judgment of the Supreme Court in what is called the Kaveri reference. The Supreme Court had passed a judgment. The state of Karnataka sought to directly overrule the judgment by means of an ordinance. The Supreme Court said, look, if you directly overrule a judgment, then you are acting as a super judiciary. The Constitution doesn't permit that. Of course, supposing there is an interpretation by the Supreme Court based on an existing law, and that law gets struck down, then if you can fix that law to fix all the flaws that were pointed out in the judgment, then you can, of course, do that and bring it back with a retrospective date. But that is where there are procedural flaws in the law, the right legislature didn't pass it, and things like that. Here, however, this law has been struck down on extreme constitutional grounds. That the principle of democracy is one man, one vote, one value. Voters have a right to know, and that these amendments are manifestly arbitrary. Now, you can't fix arbitrariness. You may have to amend the Constitution or give a new definition of arbitrariness in the Constitution itself. All that is certainly, I don't think, is possible. And if you bring in an ordinance, there will certainly be a political cost to it also.
Of course. Yes.
So soon before an election, if you do that, then the voters are likely to say that they elect a parliament which then does not ratify that ordinance.
If you look at the social media, the BJP bhakts or the devotees of the government, if I may say, they have already started saying that this entire glee and happiness over this verdict is not because for the love of transparency, but because Modi government is in the dock. So what kind of a setback is it really as far as the BJP is concerned, and of course other political parties as well, who will now have to disclose that which all corporates contributed what amount?
No. The parties don't have to disclose. It is that the SBI will disclose who all it sold it to.
Right.
That information will be on the Election Commission's website.
Right.
The linking of which parties encashed it is not there in the judgment, mind you.
Okay.
But there will be several methods of triangulation, which will you have this data, you have other publicly available data like returns on the Ministry of Company Affairs websites as to where donations were shown in the balance sheets and things like that. And then you will know at what point of time these bonds were bought by that corporate. Now, if you can then link it up to a particular benefit that a corporate got out of a government that was elected shortly thereafter, then there might be interesting consequences. So, yeah, the bucks may say anything, or even the cumbucks, if I can use the other word for the opposition. They may also say anything. What this judgment has essentially done is two things. It has said that, look, this kind of dark money, this kind of anonymous donations are not acceptable in a democracy. Secondly, those who have donated after 2019, when an interim order was passed, they certainly cannot have an expectation of anonymity. So we will direct the State Bank to publish the names. Now, it is not going to be. The State Bank is hardly likely to publish that Mr. Mukesh Ambani or Mr. So-and-so or somebody else personally bought electoral bonds. That never happens. Often it will be some tiger corporation based in some other place which has bought some bonds. And many of these will be what are called coca companies, loss-making existing companies. So that information will be the subject of much more data analysis. And we have some very good data analysts who are doing work in the public domain.
Right. So what you're saying, am I to believe that the real story now will unfold after all the data is collated, the coincidences are built up, that when the corporates donated, and then what kind of quid pro quo was given. So is the real story now yet to come out in the coming months?
Once the first part of the story is, will the data come out? Will the data come out in a fashion that is intelligible?
Okay. You have doubts about that?
I can play devil's advocate, and I can see many ways where the government, I fully expect the government to slow walk the execution of the judgment. There will be review petitions. There will be applications for extensions, this, that, and the other. So at least till the elections, I expect whoever is in the government and in charge of the State Bank to try not to reveal the names. You see, please look at our recent history. All those Swiss bank names, how many came out? How many could be properly collated? So it will be like that. Raw data may be available.
You've said 2-3 very important things, and I really want to build up on those points. Point number one, what you said is that the government will slow walk on the implementation of this verdict. Now, slow walking also, you said that probably the names will not come out, or even if they come out, they will come out at a very sluggish pace. So what can the government really do? How can the government now put a spanner? Will they put in applications? Will they go in for a review? Because that was another question which I had in mind, that can they challenge this verdict now through a review petition?
Of course, everybody is entitled to challenge it in a review petition, and it may be the government, it may be people who are not parties.
No, but even when it is a unanimous constitutional bench judgment?
There is no bar on filing a review petition. Whether the reviews will be entertained is another question. The law is that once a judgment is passed, you have 30 days to file a review petition from the date of the certified copy. Now you take 30 days from now on, and you are in the middle of March. Then let's assume that data doesn't come out. Somebody files a contempt petition. They will always say there's a review petition pending, etc., etc. Please dispose of the review. Will the review be granted an open court hearing, and so on and so forth. So I would not like to detail things too much, because I am not a government lawyer and I don't want to do their work for them or give them unnecessary ideas. But I can very well anticipate what is likely to happen.
Right. So if that is to happen, now what kind of a jolt is it really for the other political parties as well? Because I was talking to a few people, and they were talking about certain conspiracy theories, which I thought that probably it would be nice if I can clarify it with you. That do you see this as some kind of a conspiracy for the opposition parties now, because they will be exposed. Whatever funds now they have, they will have to refund it back. So like what, when demonetization was brought in, people were saying that, that was a ploy to completely sheen off all the money whatever opposition parties had just before the UP elections. So do you see this verdict in that line as well?
See, you can't have the Supreme Court conspiring with politicians. So I don't
No, of
accept
course not.
conspiracy.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. The impact of it may not be only on the BJP, it may be on certain opposition parties at the state level, especially if the opposition parties uh, found a major source of their financing through electoral bonds. And as I told you, that if the data could be collated and then said, but the problem about launching such prosecutions is that if you collect data on one side, equally well there will be data on the other side which can be collated. Already, since you spoke of social media theories, there are rumors as to some CFO, former CFO somewhere, who donated a lot through these electoral bonds and all kinds of things. So I doubt that there will be too much of state-sponsored prosecution based on electoral bonds, unless there's a dramatic change of circumstances.
Right.
What is, however, likely is that there can be a lot of citizen activism as well as shareholder activism. Now, if a
Okay.
company which has a subsidiary of another company and is a loss-making subsidiary has suddenly been donating a lot of uh, or buying a lot of electoral bonds, shareholders of those companies might have legal remedies that they can resort to.
Okay. One interesting bit which the Supreme Court also mentioned was about the quid pro quo. Now, do you think that with this verdict, what Supreme Court has said on quid pro quo, things won't happen that way because, or will the corporates come on the back foot? They will have to think twice before they elicit favors from the government. Do you see that somewhere dwindling a
No,
little?
no. See, electoral bonds was struck down on the possibilities that there were quid pro quos.
Yes.
There is another strong possibility also that electoral bonds could be used as means of extortion, as protection money.
Yes.
Look, we are in power. If you do not donate, when we come back again into power, just see what happens to you. So all these, the quid pro quos need not necessarily be only of the beneficial kind. They can also be of the protective kind. So I do think that this avenue of paying off politicians anonymously has been closed down. There will be always other avenues. And let's put it this way, the history of our country is replete with several instances. One of the instances that I gave the Supreme Court while arguing was that if if you remember during the Harshad Mehta scam, Mr. Ram Jethmalani had demonstrated how 1 crore could be fitted into a suitcase, which he had claimed that was left at the then Prime Minister's house. And you
Yes.
must remember that it was at a time when there were no 2000 rupee notes available. So, and now you don't need a suitcase. If when there were electoral bonds, you didn't need a suitcase. Just a mere envelope containing a high value bond was enough. So
True.
that kind of financing may not happen, but of course, there will be many ways that corporates and politicians learn to deal with each other.
No, internally, even a lot of BJP people have started saying that this verdict is definitely a big jolt when it comes to the political financing. But has this verdict also opened another Pandora's box? Because the very fact that the verdict has pointed out that, these kind of anonymous political donations, they are a violation of right to information. Uh, so, what about PM Cares Fund? There are a lot of such schemes where people are still have doubts, and people have filed petitions on that as well. So, will this verdict now open a bigger vista towards justice on this line?
Let me put it this way: this verdict is a welcome intervention by the courts and drawing a red line that there are certain things which governments just can't do. Now, will other courts pick up the cue from the fact that there's a unanimous verdict of 5 judges, where, uh, including the Chief Justice of today, there are 3 other future Chief Justices of India on that bench. So, will people take the baton and go on? That's an open question. You asked about the PM Cares. Now, the PM Cares has been said to be a private trust. It is and payments are made out of that, and reporting is done under the Trusts Act. It stands on a different footing legally, but nevertheless, there can be inquiries made. There can, as long as the reporting is there in accordance with the Trusts Act, the data will become available, and once it becomes available, there can be inferences drawn.
Right. One last question before we wind up the interview, Mr. Hegde. That do you see this verdict? Of course, the courts have sent out a very clear message that the governments can't do what they feel like, and it's a message for other courts as well. You very rightly put it out. But do you see this verdict as a victory of the citizens' activism, the democratic movements which are happening? Because there was a feeling that all these kind of movements are getting crushed by the mighty power of the ruling party. So, is this verdict also a victory of the citizens' movement?
Citizens took the government to court. The court struck down bad legislation. Of course, it is a victory for citizens. I do hope that the government takes the right lessons and there is no kind of vindictive response to this judgment.
Okay, so you're tempting me to ask this question: that what kind of vindictive response can we expect if that is the case?
Well, there are ways and ways. See, many of the non NGOs have been facing inquiries under the FCRA and whatnot.
Right.
So you saw only yesterday how the Congress's bank accounts got frozen.
Yes.
So I do hope that the government sees wisdom in fulfilling its constitutional duty as interpreted by the guardians of the Constitution, the Supreme Court.
Right. So, Congress's bank accounts, which were frozen yesterday, is probably one of the fallouts of the electoral bond scheme verdict.
That is what people are saying. There, again, you see, it's proximity in part of time,
Yes, that's true.
which raises suspicions.
Right.
Of course, it may be pure coincidence, but then, as the saying goes, the first time may be happenstance, the second time can be coincidence, but the third time it is generally enemy action.
Right. So we'll have to wait and watch over the conduct of the government. And as what Mr. Hegde said, that the government might slow walk. It might put some kind of a spanner, maybe a review petition. So we'll have to wait and watch how this verdict unfolds. But the real story will be seen in the coming months when the data is collated from both sides. Thank you so much, Mr. Hegde, for joining on Public India. It was a pleasure having you on the program. And the people who are watching this interview, subscribe to our channel, send us your feedback, and stay tuned to Public India. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Neelu. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, sir.